2 years ago, I was studying abroad at Yale University in New Haven. It is a it is a program organized by International Alliance of Research Universities. So participants represent top research universities around the globe, and it was a great opportunity to interact with people from different cultures, and that's something I have always been really passionate about. We will meet inspirational speakers, academics, and practitioners. We will attend lectures and seminars in international economics. We will make a field trip to the UN headquarters in New York and meet the ambassadors there. To make things even better, it was all expense paid by our sponsors. I know. So I thought it would be absolutely the best summer in my life. It would be fantastic. I was so looking forward to it. I was basically daydreaming about all the new people I'll get to meet and all the fun things I'll get to do. I thought it would be a summer I would never forget. As it turns out, it really was a summer I would never forget, just not exactly in the same way I would imagine. The summer started off great. I went to Yale, I hit it off with my roommate, I got along pretty well with the rest of my program. I got invited to birthday parties, barbecues. Well, I still studied, but I had a great time there. And then things got a little bit different when I started feeling not so well. So I had a few fevers, and then I started having these really annoying rashes. I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought it was just a hot, humid summer in New Haven. I went to the hospital, and the doctors couldn't identify what was wrong with me. So I didn't really receive any help at the moment. The situation actually exacerbated pretty fast. Not only did the skin condition got worse, I also lost my appetite. I felt weaker than I ever had. I was 20 years old. I was studying abroad in a foreign country. Even though I made tons of new friends and they all are super nice and friendly, I couldn't receive any help or support from anything or anybody I was familiar with. I was extremely scared. Every day I wake up, before I open my eyes, I will silently pray that these annoying rashes will go away or at least show signs of dying down. But they didn't. The worst part is, because I was so scared, I couldn't enjoy what could have been an informative and fun summer. Either at a barbecue or birthday dinner, I just can't help but checking on my arms and legs to see if the rashes are still there, and I was always disappointed to be proven so. My mom made this joke because I have been traveling overseas, living abroad ever since I was 16 years old, and my mom made this joke that I tend to call her more often when something's going wrong, so she's happier when I'm not calling so often because I'm probably having a good time. So that summer, I called my parents almost every day, and in the end, I couldn't help bursting into tears every time I hear their voices. Even though my parents did a fantastic job soothing me and comforting me, and I think it's because of their help and support that I actually finished my study at Yale, made the best of the summer given my condition, and made it back home. But I can only imagine how worried or scared they must have been themselves, and I do regret putting them through that. So I made it back home, and both my parents were there at the airport to greet me. At the time, my condition were a lot more obvious and clear, and we went to see a specialist, and the doctors, after a thorough checkup, identified 3 problems. First of all, the hot, humid weather in New Haven, and the fact that I didn't have the air conditioning in my room. Thank you, Yale. Secondly, I had chronic tonsillitis, which means that over the past 20 years of my life, the tonsil has been so infected that I was really susceptible to fevers or other sickness, so that would gradually weaken my immune system and lead to other complications, and that would explain the rashes. The doctor said something else that really struck me the most. He said my condition was also extremely stress-related, and he has seen cases like this happen to other young, ambitious people who travel around the world or work extremely hard to prove themselves. So that's the first time I realized that up until that point in my life, for the past 20 years, I had been an extremely ultra-type A person. I was raised with strong work ethic, and I don't think that's just because of my family, it's also the value that modern society cherishes. I don't think I took a single vacation during my 4 years of undergraduate studies. I was either working as a research assistant or as an intern or studying for GRE. I was so type A that I almost felt guilty or uneasy when I'm not occupied by some sort of tasks. So that's the first time I realized that's just messed up. That's not good. So I realized I focused so much on where I want my future to be and what I need to do to get me there that I never slowed down to enjoy what I have at the moment. So after the problems were clear, the solutions was also easy. I needed tonsil removal surgery. Tonsil removal surgery is extremely simple procedure for young children. They normally come to the hospital, they get their tonsil removed, they're up and about by the end of the day, and you barely tell that they once were sick. And I saw that happen to the 2 children who shared the ward with me when I was hospitalized. But since I was already 20 years old, things were a little bit more complicated because the tonsil was already so attached to the rest of the tissues in the back of the throat. So when you take it out, it could lead to bleeding or other complications. So that's why the doctors were extremely careful with me, and I was hospitalized for a week before my surgery. I got my surgery done. I woke up, I couldn't talk, which is normal. So I was wearing this oxygen mask, and the monitor was reading my vitals. So that is when me and my parents thought that the worst part was over, but that would have been too convenient. So for tonsillitis surgeries, after a few hours, the doctors would ask you to eat ice cream because it will help reduce the swelling of the wound. And that's what I did. I also drank some water as well. And afterwards, I couldn't stop spitting blood. At first, it was just bloody discharge, and then it's just straight on pure blood. I was basically disgorging my own blood. And I also have this thing that I feel really sick, and I sometimes faint at the sight of blood. So as my blood pressure goes up, there became more blood. So my parents completely freaked out. The doctors rushed me back to the operation room. And the last thing I remember before I left was this young doctor handing over a piece of paper to my dad, urging him to sign. I didn't know what it was at the moment. Later, I found out from my mom that it is an acknowledgement. The thing is, it's general knowledge. We probably all know that before surgery, before you get an anesthesia procedure, you have to be completely empty stomach. But because I already had food and they would have to do something about the bleeding, give me a second anesthesia, it would be extremely dangerous to do so. So on that acknowledgement, it is listed all kinds of horrifying repercussions or consequences of my second trip to the operation room. One of them being the possibility that I may not wake up. My dad is a sharp business mind. He is an entrepreneur, he is a tough negotiator. Even then, as my mom recalls, he was basically shaking when he was signing the paper. I am my parents' only child after all. So, I wouldn't exactly call what happened later a miracle of life, but to this very day, I still believe it is God's love that enabled me to wake up a few minutes after I was sent back from the operation room. I still couldn't talk. So I woke up and saw my mom wiping away the tears. And my dad, my dad has been traveling away from home all the time when I was growing up. I don't see him very often, and I always feel this distance between me and him. But when I woke up that day, my dad called me baby girl, and that's something he hasn't called me ever since I was 5. So that was an extremely emotional moment for me, and I'm probably going to remember that feeling for the rest of my life. I couldn't talk for a week. It was so painful when I swallowed that I couldn't eat solid food for 2 weeks. But I was fully recovered eventually. After some lifestyle and dietary changes, I felt happier and healthier than I ever was, both mentally and physically. A lot has happened since that ordeal. First of all, I managed to have a much better and closer relationship with my parents, especially my father. My father is an ECS major. He's never great with words. He's a believer and practitioner of tough love. We barely had any emotional conversations or he barely knows the name of my teachers when I was growing up. But he works extremely hard to provide a good living for me and the rest of his family through thick and thin, especially during the financial crisis. So my experience helped me realize that just because his love is silent, it doesn't make it less tremendous. And his love is also unconditional, and it shouldn't be taken for granted. I also moved to Australia for a year to seek a new philosophy, one that emphasizes the balance and peacefulness of life, and I did find it. I had a great time there. I met an incredible group of people who simply focuses on joy and happiness instead of any other tangible metrics or criteria of success. And I brought that philosophy home with me to the other side of the world where things can get a little bit intimidating sometimes. What happened to me was unexpected and mostly unwanted. I felt so unlucky at the time. But it did have a silver lining, as Nick said. So I think, to me, I always know that along the way, life will continue to throw hurdles at me, and it will continue to be overwhelming and terrifying sometimes. But I don't necessarily have to be alone. I can always find strength from the support of my loved ones, and most importantly, my own inner peace. And I think that's probably the most important lesson for me to remember, which is just to enjoy what life has to offer. Thank you. Happy holidays.